Boys, today I'm going to show you how to destroy the Caro-Kann defense. Now, something that shocked me that I learned is that against the Caro-Kann defense, Black has a 49% win rate compared to White's 47%. Today, I'm going to change that. Here, I would recommend to you to play d4. You'll probably face d5. And here, there are 3 options that you can do. I would go knight c3 if you're a beginner, maybe under 1,000. And I would go e5 if you're between about 1,000 and 1,700. But I would go the fantasy variation, f3, if you're above that. First, I'll start with knight c3, since this is the most straightforward. After they take, what I want you to do is take back. They'll probably play knight to f6 here. And here in this position, if you have a really low rating, what I want you to do is actually play queen to e2. Because maybe they'll play knight to d7, trying to defend their knight, because they realize that if you take, they'll have to take with this pawn and mess up their pawn structure. And now you simply have a mate in 1. But if you're like above 800, I would recommend just taking the knight, playing knight f3. And here, against either bishop d6 or knight to d7, I'd recommend you play bishop to d3. Even though bishop to d3 gives a slightly lower win rate, but what you're hoping your opponent will do, which they most likely will, is just castle. Because against this, what I want you to do is play h4. Because against rook to e8 check, which is the most common move, you'll just block with the bishop. And if they play bishop to g4, what I want you to do is not castle or play bishop to e3 like the engine suggests. Assuming you are of a low elo, play bishop takes h7, sacrificing the bishop! And look at this. The engine was hating this before, now it's 0-0-0. Look at that. Against king takes, play knight to g5 check, sacrificing the knight! And after they take back with check, and if they play king to g6, just take back and you have an absolutely brutal attack. And after Black plays a move like rook to h8, trying to trade, ladies and gentlemen, it is mate in 9 after you sacrifice the rook! Rook to h6 check, sacrificing the rook in 2 ways. After either of these moves are played, you have g takes h6 check. If king to f6 is played, you have bishop to g5 check, winning the queen. King g6, only move, boom, you take the queen. This is the best move, or else they obviously get checkmated. And then you will go with the absolutely savage, quiet move, long castle, threatening ladder mate, and there is no way to stop it. Back in this position, if they play either this or this, if they play this, you can just take, and if they play this, you can do this. So, yeah. In this position, if they just move the king back to g8, you'll just take the bishop, and still, they can't take, or else they're going to get hit with this devastating attack. Same with this position, if they go back to g8, you take the bishop, and once again, this attack is really bad for Black. And now we are moving on to the second option after d5. For intermediates, we have e5, the advanced variation. Now, firstly, against bishop to f5, which is the most common move below about 1,500, obviously play the tall variation with h4. And of course, if they go with their theory, e6, g4 will trap the bishop. But even if they play h5, the trapping is anything but over after bishop to g5. You now have a 59% win rate. Now there are 2 main moves that Black plays, those being queen to b6 and f6. If queen to b6 happens, and now after bishop to d3, you have a 60% win rate. But after bishop takes d4, it is kinda over. And here you have to play knight to f3, attacking the queen and defending this pawn. And against queen to g4 here, now you just have to castle and consolidate your position. But after after queen takes b2, your win rate is back up to 58%. Because you can just take the bishop. And even though you're going to end up down in exchange and 2 pawns, you can play e6. If they take, play bishop g6 check, they can't castle, and your bishops are just really good positioned. If they play f6 here, they've just locked in your pawn, you can move back to f4, and you're in a pretty good position. And if they play g6 here, take this pawn, take, go back to h3, and they still can't castle, their king's wide open, and it's a pretty great position. If in this position, though, they just play knight to f6, ignoring the threats, then you will now take, and then, and c3. And you might be thinking, well, that blunders the a2 pawn. Now you're allowed to play knight to e5 check, and you have 3 pieces attacking the queen. Your queen's gonna get in soon, and it's not gonna be a good time for black. And let's say in this position, black decides to take this bishop. Now you obviously take back with the queen. And now if black takes this seemingly free pawn, you can play e6, sacrificing the rook! If they play the move f6, play knight to f3, sacrificing the bishop and the rook. And if they take the bishop, then you can just castle. If they take the rook, then we have queen to b3, and nobody is going to be able to save this queen. The queen is dead. And in this position, if they just take the rook instead of the bishop, once again, queen b3, and you have an 86% win rate here. And if they take your bishop, they now are the ones losing a rook. And here they either have to sacrifice the queen or move the king to d8. And in that case, you can once again castle, and there's nothing stopping these 2 pieces from dying. And you also have major possibilities of checkmate. And in this position, really anything else will lead to a checkmate involving queen to c8. Or queen to d7. And once again, like in the last 2 positions, but this time they don't push this, they just immediately take the rook, queen to b3, traps this queen. And in this position, if they play f6, play bishop to f4. If they play queen to b6, then it can once again lead to the same kind of shenanigans we saw earlier, where the queen would trap the queen on b3. But if not, then you're probably going to be getting a fairly normal game with something like e6, with you being slightly better. You also have about a 65% win rate here. But all the way back in this position, let's say they play h6 instead of h5. What you want to do is still play g4. Now you have a 56% win rate. If black plays bishop to h7, then you will play e6. And you now have a 69% win rate. Nice. If f takes e6 occurs, play bishop d3. You now have a 71% win rate. After capturing, you take back, and you now have a 74% win rate. Knight to f6 is the most common move in this position, and here you might be tempted to give a check with queen to g6, which is the most common move for white. But I want you to wait and instead play knight to f3 first. Because black's most common move here is actually knight to d7, which hangs mate in 1 with queen to g6. And if they take this pawn, well, then queen to g6 check, and they get forked, and they can't castle. But after knight e4, which is the second most common move, pretty close, black has a little bit of hope. But after knight to d2, you still have an 87% win rate. Especially after, boom, queen to d6. You now have a 90% win rate. We have queen to d7. Then knight to e5 check. This knight's still hanging. After any move black makes, only then will you take this knight with the bishop. And now you have an absolutely brutal attack. Since this video is already 10 minutes long, I will be making a part 2 about how to deal with c5 instead of bishop to f5, and also about the fantasy variation. So, make sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Oh yeah!